You take me for a walk.
And welcome to this week's edition of Twin Peaks Unwrapped. I'm your host, Bryon Kazaska, and beside me as always,
Ben Durant.
And we're going to take a break from talking about Twin Peaks episodes.
And we've got Joel Bocko back on. He's the guy who does Journey Through Twin Peaks video essays. And hey, Joel.
Hey, how are you guys?
Good.
Good.
It's good to have you on. So yeah, you did your own chapter on this. That part of your Journey Through Twin Peaks, 17 through 23.
Yep.
And it isn't probably the best. It probably isn't our favorite section of Twin Peaks.
It's interesting.
It's still interesting.
But yeah, not the favorite, but interesting.
Right. And I think about this as kind of like Cooper's journey in itself. Like he's kind of like he's no longer an FBI agent. He's got his flannels. He's kind of like he's exploring his life. He's kind of maybe thinking about buying some property,
going fly fishing.
What do you think? What do you think about this section of Twin Peaks?
Well, before I say anything, I want to, and maybe this is overkill because maybe Bryon already did, but I would like to hear Bryan's sort of overall impressions of this patch. Before we spoil him with our own thoughts.
Sounds good.
Okay. Well, last week was episode 23 for us, and we left off where Josie passes away from what we think could have been a stroke or heart attack or love hurt. We don't know what. Yeah. And this string leading to that point has had some really cool stuff with Cooper, and we get to see Albert and all these cool characters we like, but then we've had the not so interesting stuff with James.
Maybe Nadine.
Oh, Nadine, yeah. Nadine.
Little Nicky.
Little Nicky. The Little Nicky storyline was kind of lame. Nadine was like a cartoon, was like Looney Tunes come to life.
Yeah, there's a lot of cartoon in this.
Yeah,
in this section.
The Little Nicky stuff, I'm glad died quick. I'm glad Hank, Big Ed, and Norma get together. I was very happy. I'm not excited to hear that Norma's sister's coming to town because that means something weird's going to happen. I'm not that excited by that, but it could be good. I don't know yet.
Bryon thinks that
when you say something weird, what do you mean by that?
Well, her mom was a horrible person, and then the mom,
the food critic,
and the mom's boyfriend became, Ernie was nuts. So I'm like, oh God, they're gonna throw another family member at her. Like, leave the poor woman alone.
Yeah, I do have to say, fun film fact. Although I agree, the MT Wentz plot is pretty terrible. It's kind of nice to see the mom because she was actually a famous actress from a noir in the 40s, Out of the Past, with Robert Mitchum.
Oh,
she's Jane Greer, beautiful femme fatale in that movie, probably about 42 years before Twin Peaks, so she was still acting. I don't know if she's still with us or what she's doing now, but so that's kind of a nice little note. Yeah, it is unfortunate. And actually, another funny thing, unfortunate that she didn't have a better plot to participate in. But another funny fact of an actor kind of being thrown, who would have been a great casting, thrown away on a terrible part, was that originally they wanted to have the Milford brother who dies be played by William S. Burroughs.
Wow.
Which would have been, if you can imagine him on Twin Peaks,
right.
That would have been wild.
Yeah.
But that would have been so sad to have him. Yeah, to have Dougie Milford, to have that great stunt casting thrown away on such a flimsy story, I can't imagine it would have been worthwhile. So that's one plot you didn't mention that may be my least favorite.
Oh, yeah.
Although I do like the mayor is funny.
He is.
But the whole Milana Milford plot is just like, what are you doing?
Yeah,
and that's a key moment too, I think, where the brothers fight at the wake. A lot of people point to that. It's sort of a weird turning point in the show, for better or worse.
I do agree with that. Yeah, it is a turning point. I remember that going. It was weird that we're doing that. So yeah, I do agree. I think overall, Ben said, there's gems in each episode, and I do believe that. I think my favorite episode was directed by.
Oh yeah, you like Diane Keaton.
Diane Keaton's episode.
Like that, so you like the style of it?
I felt her style to me was very. It felt like a David Lynch directed episode. I mean, I might be castrated for saying that, but I do.
You will be stoned.
I will be stoned. But I honestly felt her directing style was very interesting because all the other episodes were directed very vanilla. It was
I actually do agree completely. I have mixed feelings about the Diane Keaton episode. We'll get to that. But I agree completely with you that her episode stands out very starkly because it follows a bunch of episodes that some of them have some neat flourishes, but for the most part, very TV, very typical.
Yeah.
Really nothing visually that would stand out. That would remind you, hey, we're watching the show that, David Lynch started.
Yeah, and it was cool. They did the close-up of the chess pieces. She did long shots where it felt like a David Lynch
no
shot.
Cuts. There were no cuts. Right.
Everything was... She did these framed and windows things using door windows to show that the characters were behind there. And it was just kind of cool, kind of like visually interesting. I think that was my favorite episode.
And Joel,
directed.
Joel, what do you, I mean, I don't want to knock Diane or anything, but do you think that was this her own style, or do you think other people kind of led her in that direction?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
no, 100% her, because she was she was an art photographer before.
There you go.
She directed anything. I mean, obviously she was an actress before anything else, but she was throughout the '80s. She released photo books. And I haven't seen them, but from what I've heard, they're very much the style. So if anything, I would say the opposite almost. Like, I think she came on with her strong idea, and some people were a little resistant to it. One of them was Richard Bamer, who plays Ben Horn. He was a little like, are we really going to go this far with the Civil War thing? Like, the walls are all painted now, and everyone's in costume. I think for her, she definitely seized upon the idea of Twin Peaks as this sort of heightened, very stylized universe. And that was sort of, I think every director who directs Twin Peaks, they sort of pull something different from the Lynch playbook and from the pilot and from the template that's been established. So, some of them you'll see, well, they really hone in on the Peaksy, woodsy, kind of coffee and pie, all the little, like I think the one right before her, directed by Uli Edel, the German director.
Yeah,
I think he really hones in on that sort of Twin Peaks feel, where it's like every scene they got pie and there's like everything is wood decor, and he really emphasizes that. And there's a cabin in the. I mean, that was in the script, but within that, I think for Diane Keaton, it was definitely David Lynch does shots that sort of call attention to themselves and make you feel a little disoriented, and they're very surreal. And she seized on that and kind of ran with it. And it was her own. I think it suited her own style as well, and it very much kind of fits in that late '80s, early '90s vibe.
Yeah,
that I think a lot of. If you were going to stylize something, that would be kind of how you'd do it. You'd have the filters and the dissolves over each other, and those shots of like everyone, like that feels very sort of early '90s to me.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I guess I'll say with that one, I'm definitely not a big fan of it, but I think I go back and forth between feeling annoyed because I feel like her style doesn't mesh as well, and it feels a little artificial to me, like she's posing everybody. Whereas with Lynch, it's strange, but there's like something more organic to it for me. On the other hand, I've seen the episode several times because I've watched the whole. I think I've only watched it when I'm watching the whole series. It's not one that I have pulled out and watched independently. Right. But sometimes when I watch it, I'm really sick of the previous episodes, and it feels like a relief. Like, whoa, at least she's trying to like do something fun and different. So I do have kind of the mixed feelings about it.
Yeah,
I think.
And finding out that she was an artist really kind of she has that eye,
right?
And it really that shows in this episode. For me, a lot of those scenes play out like you're watching a moving painting.
Yeah,
or it's a wide shot like Lynch would do. And you're right. I mean, with Lynch, his was more organic because if things just happened, he let it happen.
Right.
And maybe she was a little bit more controlled about things, but it still came out.
That's a good comparison.
Yeah, enjoyable. I mean, visually stunning. visually, it was a great episode. Yeah, was it the best episode of the bunch? Probably not, but visually, it made it entertaining.
Right.
So
I agree. So
What was your least favorite episode of the group?
Oh God,
If you can remember, I mean, they probably blur together a little bit. But
I know.
they do. Do you remember, Ben? What I
Well,
said?
I mean,
what was our least favorite?
It would have to do with Andy and Little Nicky.
Oh yes, the episode.
Oh, that's right, episode 19.
Yeah, where Dick is changing the tire and he's on the picnic
Yeah.
blanket, and he all of a sudden comes to the conclusion that Nikki wants to kill him.
Yeah.
It was a kind of
Yeah.
ridiculous episode.
Wait, and you also hated the part where Andy's talking to Lucy and he's saying, "We discovered he's probably a murderer," and then you have a balloon
The cartoon balloon.
of Nikki as Satan or something.
Yeah, I thought that was kind of corny.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was probably my least
Although-
favorite stuff.
It's funny because I just listened because when we're recording this, the most recent episode I listened to was the 19 one, and
Yeah.
you mentioned those scenes, but then you also liked a lot of others. So it's kind of funny that because I do the same thing. It's like in retrospect, sometimes the bad parts stick out more,
Yeah.
and that ends up sort of sinking what we might have otherwise, been okay with or whatever.
And for
But-
me, because I'm watching them.
So that's funny that you specifically mentioned that one because
Yeah.
it's just the other day.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
I
funny.
heard you talking about it, and you were like, "Oh, this was okay." not to call you out on it, but it was just
No.
funny.
Well, it's
You didn't
weird.
like those scenes, but you mentioned the other ones being like, yeah.
Yeah, it's so hard because I'm watching these so close together. I can't tell you an
Yeah,
episode.
you remember the bad bits for
yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't
That's what
say
sticks out.
yeah, an episode
Or the
I would say,
really good bits.
Yeah.
The-
Like
That's strong one way or the other.
exactly. I can't say an episode per se, but I can say the storyline. What storylines
Yeah.
I'm enjoying more.
Nikki.
Yeah, the Little Nicky stuff I didn't enjoy. The James stuff I was kind of James his storyline had one episode I enjoyed it. When you found out that guy could be it's not her brother or you don't know
Malcolm
who
there.
Malcolm,
Yeah.
you don't know who he is. And
Yeah.
it was corny when Malcolm was just kind of like he would sit down, he got all serious and basically told James what to do, and they snapped out of it. He's like, "Oh, have a good day," and he leaves.
Yeah, it's hilarious.
Yeah.
In a probably, I don't know how intentional. It's so hard to say because they do go for campy stuff. Like what's supposed to be funny and what's just bad, so bad it's funny. But there's another podcast called the Twin Peaks Podcast, and I think maybe the funniest thing they ever did had me like laughing hysterically. Was they called that character Exposition Malcolm because he literally just walks into the room, sits down, talks for like an info dump for 2 minutes, and stands up and walks out. And he does it repeatedly, like scene after scene.
You're right.
So now I can't watch it without thinking Exposition Malcolm.
Yeah, you're right. That's what he is. And I told Ben the first time I saw him when he sits down with James, I'm like, he literally just tells James what to do and everything that's going on and just goes, and then his mood changes. Like, I'll see you later. You're like, it is weird. He's a very weird character.
Joel, when you first watched it, maybe the first time, and we went from 16, where Leland dies, and it seems like the Laura Palmer storyline is over, and he's like, "Oh, where's Bob now?" And then the next episode, we're into 17, and we're at a funeral, and it seems like we're just done with Bob altogether. And Cooper basically says to Sarah Palmer, "It's like, you'll never see Bob again." Basically, what did you think about that? I mean, I don't know what direction it was going in. I mean,
it's funny. I can't totally remember my reaction. I think I felt kind of funny about that scene, like something didn't quite feel right. But I can't remember my reaction to that so much as the wake scene. That I remember my reaction really well. And the funny thing is, you mentioned I have a whole chapter of Journey Through Twin Peaks devoted to 17 through 23, which is by far the largest stretch of episodes I cover in a single video. Usually I go maybe 3, 4, sometimes even 1 or 2 episodes in a chapter. That one I covered 7 whole episodes. But and that's true. But the funny thing is, I actually have another whole episode devoted just to that one scene at the wake because it's such a turning point on the show that I thought I've got to have just one chapter just focused on that, and then it closes out a part of the essay, so it goes in a different direction. But there's still like several minutes just devoted to that scene. So yeah, so when I watched that episode, I think after 16 or after 14, because I think that's where the DVD break comes. It goes 14, and then the next disc is 15, 16, 17, and so forth on the gold box. So I put that in the mail, and I switched all my Netflix queues to Twin Peaks. I said, I have got to see what happens next. This show, we're halfway through the show, and they solved the mystery. And I think at the time, or maybe even if people know more about the show, they go in expecting, well, this is where it gets less interesting, and they maybe even stop watching. You know, they go, and they fall out of it, and years go by, and they go, oh, yeah, I never finished Twin Peaks because they lost interest. For me, though, I didn't really know much about the show, so I thought this is going to get even more interesting now because Bob's out on the loose, or you know, Leland hadn't even died yet at this point. It was like, where can they go from here? What could possibly happen? So when it got to that wake scene, I just had this funny feeling in like the pit of my stomach, and it was like getting worse as I was watching it, and this feeling of dread just started to creep up on me, and it sort of, as they're like telling all these corny jokes, they're playing that awful music, and just like everybody's, and I'm like, wait a second, they're at a wake. Like I'm mentally comparing it to the Laura's funeral scene, which was so dramatic, and it had humor, but it was very dark humor. It was all about the importance of her and her death, and this is like Leland, one of the biggest characters on the show. You kill her, and everybody, you would never know whose funeral they're at. They're laughing and joking, and they're, you know, trading barbs, and it makes no sense. Even if Twin Peaks isn't a realistic show, it makes no total sense whatsoever to have a wake for the respected member of the town who is a serial killer, who killed his own daughter, who may have been possessed by an evil spirit from the woods, and everyone there is telling like fishing jokes and, hey, I haven't seen you since you were in Hawaii, and they're grinning ear to ear like there's not an unhappy person in that room. It is so absurd. It is. And not in a good way. So the moment that turned it was when the two brothers are pushing each other, and two people we've never seen. I think the mayor was in one scene.
Yeah, he's on pilot.
Two strangers. And they're pushing each other into the pies, and the music's doing its like little drum roll, and I just said, oh my God, this is becoming a sitcom. I can't believe this is happening. And I was like horrified. So for me, all of the next episodes were very colored by that. And I got through them pretty quickly because I think it was a good thing that I'd converted all my, DVD queues to Twin Peaks, so I could move through that quickly. But I just did not have a very good impression overall of all of it. And I think I had a couple problems. One of them, was obviously, as we just discussed, the fact that it didn't deliver at all on the stuff that had been building up to that point. It just took a total detour. And then also, I didn't like how many plots were set up.
Oh, yeah.
And I thought, well, this is going to be going somewhere. And they all just dropped after 3 or 4 episodes. Like, I thought, okay, this James Evelyn thing, it can't just be she's trying to... There's got to be something deeper going on. It's connected to this or that or the town or there's a... And it was like, nope, just what you thought it was, and it's over. And Little Nicky, he's not the devil, he's gone. And then he's out.
Yeah.
And just realizing that the writers had no offense. Love, Harley Payton and Bob Engels, and they did a lot of great work on there. But I think they were left without any safety net. Yeah. Like Frost and Lynch just kind of left them without any sort of guidance. And it was like, well, what the hell can we do now? And they're sort of friends, they lost a storyline they wanted to use. So I have some sympathy for them, but really it just was very disillusioning. And then when it got to the end of that Josie episode, a lot of people really like that episode, and they feel like the moment when Bob and the little man pop up on the couch, or the bed, it's like, oh, good, Twin Peaks is back. Thank God. For me, it was the opposite. I watched that scene, and I just felt like nothing, and I thought, now they've ruined the mythology, too. Yeah. This didn't feel like at all how Lynch would shoot Bob or the little man, and then it's like, what is this ridiculous doorknob? So that was kind of the low point for me on the first watch. I think since then, it sort of feels like, okay, maybe that's the beginning of a comeback or something like that. But, I remember being very disenchanted. So I think it took me, I watched the show again soon after, but I never revisited those episodes until about, 6 years later, I think.
Yeah,
I finally went back and I said, I'm going to watch the whole show again, because I wrote an episode guide and I just flat out skipped everything until the finale. I said, from Leland's death, I covered that. And then I said, now we're going to skip to the finale. And we just did that, which I wouldn't do today. But at the time, it was like, I'm not going to sit through that again. You know, I was very disenchanted. And as it turns out, I think a lot of people, so it's good to hear Bryan's sort of fresh take without too much influence, because it does seem like a lot of people kind of have that experience where they get kind of disillusioned with it at that point, you know.
Yeah.
But when I watched it the second time, I thought, oh, you know what, this isn't as bad as I remembered. It's got a lot of good moments. I think that time watching it, I was kind of into the characters and performances. I thought they're having fun with it, but it still felt a little pointless. It felt like, okay, this isn't as bad as I remembered, but it still doesn't feel. And then as I started doing the journey through Twin Peaks and all that stuff, I kind of got to see more of the value. How even though I still feel like they made so many mistakes going in this direction, I think ultimately where they take it, in retrospect, I wouldn't say justifies, but it at least puts a lot of the stuff, I think particularly with Cooper, in a larger context where it kind of works, or at least builds towards something that works.
Yeah. Joel, to go back to the bed scene, we just covered that episode last week, and that scene for me, I felt kind of like, I kind of feel the same way you did. I was excited to see something like that happen, but I was sad that they recycled things we've already seen and they didn't give us something new. Bob didn't make sense to me. It doesn't make sense to me yet. I don't know, because I don't know beyond that episode if it's going to, and Ben won't tell me, and I'm happy. But for me, I saw Bob and I went, that doesn't make sense. And the little man does not belong on a bed. He belongs in the red room. So that, okay, a part of me was like, cool, Twin Peaks is back. But at the same time, I'm like, why didn't they give us something new? And that's my biggest complaint about these episodes. And I've been telling Ben every show, I kind of feel like they took all the stuff we loved in the beginning, and they know the audience loves that stuff, and they're cramming it in as much as they can.
Almost recycling it.
They're recycling the same cliches. So it's like the owls are heavy-handed. Every shot has an owl. There's an owl. There's an owl.
There's a decoration owl.
A lamp owl.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, there's, it's like all these things you loved, you saw them sporadically. All of a sudden, it's like, well, let's fill the screen with owls. Let's do a lot of the cliches that you loved in the beginning. Like, to give us Bob and the little man on the bed in the spotlight, it just felt like it was cool, but at the same time, I'm like, it would have been really cool to give us something new, like, and fresh.
Or what was the point?
What was the point of all that? And like, give us something new to hold. You'd be like, ooh, a new mystery. I felt like you're just recycling two things we've seen before.
Yeah. Well, what I thought about strange about these, especially these 7 episodes, where that, like, in the first season we had the Red Room dream kind of got us through the first season. It was like the clues that Cooper could take to get him to, and then we get to the second season and we have a giant who's kind of given the clues to help Cooper on his way. And so these are all these supernatural elements. And then we get to this part after the Laura Palmer storyline, and I feel like Cooper's just lost. And maybe that's the point. Maybe he's trying to find himself. But I kind of miss that supernatural element. Like, maybe they need to give him a new dream, or they need to do something, because right now he's just kind of like...
It felt like recycled things. It's like...
We didn't have anywhere to go. I mean, I didn't know. There was no direction. And it's like,
and I think that's the mechanism they use in the show to give Cooper a direction. And even that mechanism was lost. It was like, here's two things that, to me as a viewer, I was just like, that's great, but what does it mean? Because the giant, you knew, okay, he's giving him something. And the Red Room...
Did you say the lodge?
Would I say the lodge? What he just saw?
No, sorry. I think you said Cooper got lost. I thought you said lodge. Never mind. Keep going. Sorry. You can cut that out.
No, just like Cooper being lost, but like it would give him a direction. But this premonition or whatever he saw it didn't really do anything. I mean, for me, so far, I don't get it.
Yeah, and Joel just said about the lodge. I do like that mythology. We start off I think 17 with Cooper and Briggs.
But it's never been brought up. I mean, it's barely been brought up.
And you have kind of X-Files abduction stuff. And
the White Lodge.
The White Lodge.
And the Black Lodge, what happened to that?
Well, I mean, I can't say right now.
I know. But we haven't heard anything about the Black Lodge. We heard stuff about the White Lodge, which is interesting. But it would have been cool if Cooper saw something like the White Lodge at that moment. Like the White Lodge. Yeah. There's so much talk up of the White Lodge. What if Cooper saw something like that? Or we just got Bob.
We kind of. I mean, that's what Major Briggs, I guess, was for.
Yeah,
he seems like he might have gone to the White Lodge.
Yeah, if he saw Major Briggs and he gave him the clues of what he needs to do. Yeah, that would have been cool. But
he's in the shadows. He's there. But
I just feel like they're giving us all the things you like, but nothing new. They're just recycling. Yeah. You know.
Well, that's an interesting point because I think sometimes people say the reverse, and in a weird way, both are kind of true. It's like, well, they're not giving us. They've taken away too much of the Twin Peaks. But I think you're right. It's like they chose certain things to keep and do overkill with, and they chose certain things to get rid of.
Yeah.
And it's like the things they got rid of were a little more substance, and the things they kept and hammered in were like a little more sort of superficial in a way.
Yeah.
Just a shot of an owl, but not like a sense of mystery in the woods, really. Another interesting thing you said, we didn't see the White Lodge. We didn't see... And I think that's a key point. They are trying to introduce some new mythology in this section. And I agree. I think it's the lodge stuff. But it's all verbal.
Yeah.
The show was so visual before, and you would see the images, and then you try and figure them out. And now they're just telling you things. They're saying there's lodges, there's a dweller on the threshold, there's... what are the other things they talk about? Project Blue Book.
Right.
And other than that one scene, which, it's kind of cheesy, but I like it, where Briggs is sitting on a throne and they're zooming in slowly. That's kind of campy, but it's fun, and at least they're showing you something.
Yeah,
they're giving you a visual to look at. And I think that's part of the problem with this stretch of episodes. And it really, to me, I think we can afford to give you a little context on this, which is that David Lynch basically, and I guess Harley Payton will maybe in your interview clarify this a little bit, but according to most people, Lynch creatively was not as involved. He may have been around the office, he may have been sort of available, but he wasn't having the input he had before. And you can see that, and same thing with Mark Frost, actually. If you look at the credits, Frost hasn't written an episode since Leland died, and Lynch hasn't directed one since Leland was revealed as the killer. So that's now almost 10. That's 10 episodes. Yeah, 9 episodes have gone by that Lynch has not directed, and I think 7 episodes. You've just watched 7 episodes that Frost didn't write. Now, Frost was still supervising the script and everything like that, but these are the two creators, and they're really not having a hand. So Lynch was really the one who always would think visually, and he would give the show those touchstones, and then Frost or other writers could grab it and run with it. Okay, so we got this red room, we got this little man, we got these lines, the gum you like, now what are we going to do with that? And they had something to work with. They're kind of like flying blind now because Lynch isn't stepping in to give them interesting visual motifs or things to work with.
And the one thing that David Lynch did do,
stuck a little bit.
Right? What David Lynch did ask for visual was his idea was the whole Josie in the drawer.
Good point.
That was her, which is a little bizarre. You don't know what to make of it, but that was that was his input. And I mean, Harley would say from his interview that Lynch was around, but I think he would say that he wasn't really a manager. Mark Frost was good at being the manager, and I think Lynch was about being stylistic and artist and stuff like that. And so, he would throw things in there, but sometimes David Lynch would throw things in which would kind of mess up the whole script or something like that, where you couldn't just change things the day before and stuff. So I think
I remember you mentioned that in Reflections.
Yeah,
that there was a scene he wanted someone to shoot and it was the night before.
Right. And so I think Harley Peyton would have these disagreements with Lynch about this and say, we can't just change everything on the spot. And especially because the reason they were doing things the way they were was to lead to the next episode.
Yeah.
And I think Harley would say that wasn't Lynch's style. He wasn't thinking, 3 episodes ahead and stuff. He was thinking about that. So, yeah, it's interesting. It's really fascinating. I mean, I know I've thought about it a long time too. What was Lynch's involvement in the second season and stuff?
It was great to hear from him.
Yeah, Harley about that. But
it's pretty cool.
So this was. You also brought up in chapter 13 of your journey through Twin Peaks about the Cooper and Audrey romance and how that was.
Can we talk? I guess we can talk about that. I didn't know.
Yeah, why not?
To, okay.
I think I brought it up already to.
Right now,
Bryan.
Billy Zane.
What are your thoughts on it, Bryan? I guess put it that way before we say anything.
Well, Billy Zane is in the picture, and I think that Billy Zane and Audrey are having sparks. Okay, so in the story, that's where I am. But Cooper and Audrey, I don't think. Well, I don't know if we discussed this with you, Joel. I mean, I must have discussed this on the show before, but
yeah, I heard you talk about it.
Yeah, I think Audrey and Cooper, for me, I watch the show and I feel like she has a crush on him. Like if a girl had a crush on their teacher or something, she looks up to him. And I think she has a crush on him, but I look at it like a father. Like to me, he feels like a father figure to her. But
yes,
I know when season 3 hits, I don't know if, whatever, maybe they could be together. I don't know. But for right now, I think in the show, it makes sense to have her have a relationship with someone more close to her age. And Cooper, being the Boy Scout that he is, I could not see him date a high school student. Yeah, it'd be kind of weird.
Yeah.
So, do you know any of the behind-the-scenes stuff?
I know that Cooper did. Kyle MacLachlan found it would be weird if he dated her because I think he was going out with
the actress who plays Donna.
Donna. So I think I think what I read was, or Ben told me, he felt uncomfortable about that, and it wouldn't feel like a Cooper thing to do, right?
Yeah,
I guess so.
He felt like it wasn't true to the character to do that, and a lot of people, allege that it was really Lara Flynn Boyle pushing him to say that. Mm-hmm. I don't know if I necessarily... I have no problem believing that she and Sherilyn Fenn did not get along and she didn't really want... But I do think that Kyle MacLachlan was being honest about the character. That he didn't think it was a good decision for him to romance a high schooler, basically. This FBI agent, straight arrow.
Right.
So it's always interesting to me because they did plan that. They had it written out. They had it all planned. This is going to happen next, and you can all kind of see in the second season, the beginning of it, like they're planning for that. You know, like okay, they're setting the groundstone. He's rescuing her from One-Eyed Jacks.
Yeah,
all these little seeds are there, and then it's just dropped like a hot potato. I don't think they drop it very gracefully. They don't. There's a lot of stuff they don't do gracefully in that stretch.
Yeah.
As to whether they should have or not, that gets into a sort of complicated question, which I think is about how they handle it, first of all, and, could they handle it in a way that actually made it look like Cooper was making a mistake?
Oh.
And would that have been consistent? Because I do wonder, because they talk about it like it would just be this great romance to sort of tide people over during the mid-season until they built up to the finale. And we haven't talked at all about Windom Earle yet, but we'll get into that, I'm sure.
Yes.
But so that's kind of how people talk about it. But I wonder, would they maybe have made it a little more compelling? Because they are showing right now Cooper having more of a dark side. They're showing him his he talks about. I gotta be careful what I say because I know that.
Well, I mean, they do say that he basically did have an affair with his ex-partner.
Okay, so they do say that. Yeah, I can't remember. I can never remember if that was like the 23 or 24 or what. Okay.
Yep.
So they show that. They show that he's out of the FBI and he's a little bit humiliated. He's in flannel. One of the fun things I did with the video, not chapter 13, but the one right before that, is I did a split screen montage where I show the characters in the first season and then how they appear in mid-season. And it's almost a hilarious stark contrast. Like you get Cooper all shiny and his hair slicked back in his suit. And then he's got like a bruise on his face, and he's wearing flannel, and he's frowning, and one shot he's standing up, and the other one he's sitting down. So you really see this dramatic shift.
Yeah.
And, maybe they could have made it like him having an affair with Audrey was a mistake he was making that was sort of leading back to his past. So I think that potentially it could have been interesting if they played that way. If they just tried to make it, pass it off as like, which I'm kind of afraid they might have done given how they handle a lot of other stuff, that just like this, oh yeah, she's 18, it's okay. But, she's very immature and she's very like sort of lost, and he knows, So I think I agree with you, Bryan, that it would have been the wrong thing for him to do as a character.
Yeah.
But I think dramatically, if they recognize that, maybe they could have done something interesting with it. But of course, we'll never know.
Yeah, and Cooper did. Yeah. Cooper did kind of, in one of the episodes, Cooper did talk to Audrey about his past and that he had about a woman and stuff like that. And he kind of basically kind of says, you were part of an investigation, the Laura Palmer thing. And he kind of hints at it. But you're right, they could have said it better that, hey, I made mistakes in the past with a woman and I'm not going to make mistakes with you. Yeah. I think but in chapter 13, your video essay there, I thought you made a great point about they could have been soulmates without them falling in love. Well, that's
the other aspect of it. If they're not going to do the romance, if that's not going to happen, they're not going to make it positive or negative, they're just not going to do it, fine. But why did they stop ever talking to each other? I think there's 7 or 8 or however many episodes that go by, and she kisses him in that episode with Denise.
Right. Yeah. That's the last time, right?
Never see them together again, at least certainly not up to the point that you're at now.
Yeah.
No,
I don't think they're ever even in the same scene, and that seems kind of silly to me. It's like, do you really? Did he really go up to them and say, "I don't want any more scenes with her"? I somehow doubt it. I wish they hadn't gone to that extreme. Well, you're not going to have a romance, fine. Let's just separate the characters completely. That's a big loss to the show because they had such a great dynamic and chemistry.
Yes,
and it pushed the story forward and the characters forward quite a bit. So that's a loss. And Audrey drifts a lot in these episodes, I think. That's sort of a sad thing to see, is that great character. I really think through the entire second season she's underserved. Even the early parts where they're good, they got her. I think the first couple, the premiere, she's good. The second Lynch one where she strangles Emery Battis, she's good. And then after that, she's on drugs, she's passed out. I know she had pneumonia, so maybe that was why they did it, but they just, from that episode on, up to the point you're at now, and sad to say, for some more to come, they just really have sort of taken the life out of that character. And she was, some people would say she was the best character on the show in the first season, so that's sad to see.
It is.
Yeah, she's like turning into a businesswoman right now, and she doesn't go to school anymore.
But I kind of miss the older that she's manipulative and she was. It's
How about the fact that they never wanted to arrest Ben for running a brothel, funneling girls from his store to a brothel, which they know he did. There's so many dropped storylines that drive me nuts. It's like they just hit a reset button on episode 17, and we're like, let's just almost start over and forget everything that came before.
So you brought up Windom Earle. Do you want your take on Windom Earle? So we finally, I forget what episode it was, but Leo stumbles into his cabin, and there we finally see Windom Earle.
That was a cool scene, meeting Windom Earle.
We see Windom Earle, and he's spooky, and he's sitting there, and he's a little bit menacing, and charming, and you think, oh, this character's going to be good, and then the next scene you see him in long johns playing a flute.
I
forget what you said, Bryan. If you called him a nymph or an elf.
He looked like an elf. Like he's dancing around, and he reminded me when he had the mustache, one of those, like a villain from a cartoon. He's going to start like.
Oh, absolutely. He's a cartoon villain all the way.
Right.
Yeah, that's
and you almost kind of just have to accept it and roll with it. And I think he's got some good scenes and even some good episodes coming up, but there's a few issues with him that I found. So I mean, how do you feel about him right now, Bryan?
Well, right now, I mean, I have a question for you, Joel. I asked Ben this, and this is I'm trying to figure out what kind of
excuse me.
Bless you. What kind of person was he when he was with Cooper as a cop because he comes off as psychotic.
That's a great question. I haven't even really thought about that enough.
He's a villain.
That's a good question.
Yeah, but like he's a villain now. And he just had one traumatic break. His wife was with Cooper. We don't know if they were they might have liked each other. We don't know how far it went. He was in love with her. She was in love with him. And maybe they felt guilty about it. We know that he was the killer. He probably killed her and left the body, and Cooper put the pieces together. So we kind of know this. But does that mean that was the switch that made him psychotic? Was he psychotic before and he was good at hiding it?
And we will get to an episode where we learn a little bit more of his backstory. And I think also...
Yes, that's true. That's a good point.
Yeah.
Also, there's the autobiography. If we consider that canon, the book, Dale Cooper's book, I think there's a little bit of backstory on that case and working with him as a partner. But
were they partners for a long time? You can indulge me in that, right?
I can't remember. I feel like it's definitely a few years and stuff like that. I was trying to remember when we were watching one of the episodes if it's been 4 years since the death of Carolyn. I can't remember how long.
I think that sounds right because I feel like in the book it says around 75 or so, and I do know that all the Caroline Windom Cooper stuff takes place in 1979. So 10 years.
Okay.
The Twin Peaks takes place in 1989, so it's 10 years before that.
Okay.
That they said it. So 4 years. That sounds about.
Yeah, I don't know if they ever really say in the
right.
TV show, but we could look at the book at some time.
So do you guys think he was psychotic the whole time? What kind of partner was he?
I mean, I think we'll learn more.
So I will learn more about that.
I think there's at least another.
I like the idea that he's eccentric, but he seems like a good guy.
Yeah.
Like at that time. That's if I'm gonna do it, headcanon and envision Windom Earle in the mid to late 70s. He's a little bit like I could see him staring off into space and kind of acting odd, but kind of straightforward. Certainly not laughing hysterically and dancing around or whatever.
Playing the flute.
But this very concentrated kind of brilliant mentor figure. Who Cooper's kind of in awe of. I could totally see that. That would be, I could buy that,
Totally.
And then I think, the switch probably comes around that time. Now, whether that's because of Cooper and Caroline or because of something else or if it's an earlier thing, there's all kinds of, some of that we'd have to wait to get into, I think, until after the series and even really after the book a little bit.
Yeah. All right. At least I'll find out more about his past.
Now, actually, we'll save that question for later.
Okay. All right.
for the end of the show.
We'll put a pin in that.
So
another thing, I guess. Oh yeah, what were you going to say?
No, what were you going to say, Joel?
I guess we could talk a little bit about the Josie stuff because that's certainly the last couple episodes you watched. That really becomes the main storyline. I think for a while it's Cooper and the drugs is kind of the main storyline that gets resolved, and then it's really they kind of move on to Josie, resolving Josie, and that becomes the thing. So what did you think of all of that?
Well, we have to talk. Josie's my least favorite character. Since the beginning of the show, it was convoluted, and I never really cared that much. And this section of the show makes you focus more on her. And you feel I feel bad for Truman. I feel bad for Truman, and because I like Truman a lot. So I think that's my connection to her is through Truman's eyes. You're kind of you feel bad for him. You empathize with him. And it was weird how she died. Did she die from a heart attack? Was it a metaphor of her heart breaking? Did she have? What did
she doesn't have the
from?
will to live.
I think she died from whatever killed Padme in the Star Wars.
That's what I was thinking, exactly.
The other side of the Force cutter.
Episode 3.
Episode 3. Or what did she? Maybe she took a pill to kill herself.
I don't know.
I feel like she didn't want to go to jail. She did not want to come to any. She didn't want to pay for any of the things she's done wrong.
Yeah.
And she felt bad for Truman.
I told you in the script of episode 23, I thought the script seemed to do a better job explaining that she was going to kill herself. She in the actual show, she has the gun up against her, up against her chest, but it's not as clear that she was going to actually kill herself. And then
she just dies or faints. And
Well, I think in the next episode you're going to watch, they do address it. I don't know how
Okay.
satisfactorily they address it, but they address what her cause of death may have been, and then later on they tie that in with other things. So.
and it wasn't in the drawer. I really thought it would be in the drawer. Why did they get the whole drawer, the knob?
Oh, her face on the knob.
Yeah,
So,
I thought,
that apparently was David Lynch's idea, and that was
Right.
his one. As far as I can tell, that was his like one big addition to like all of these episodes. Like,
Yeah.
there's nothing. It was like other than wanting some scene with Catherine that they apparently didn't shoot. The only thing I've heard confirmed that's like, oh, David Lynch was the one who came up with this.
Yeah.
Was the doorknob, and I think he was like overseas in like an art
Japan
doing an
there, I
art
think.
show
Yeah,
in
yeah.
Japan or
Yeah,
something.
yeah.
And they called up and they were like, "Yeah, David, Joan Chen she wants to leave the show. She's going to do a movie, and what are we going to do? I guess we got to kill her off." And he said, "I've got it. Josie's soul is in the draw pull."
There you go.
Yeah.
What? Okay, and it was like they couldn't like. What are you talking about? Okay, I guess we got to do it. So they did it.
Right.
It's like, it's kind of, I won't say it's half-assed, but it's a little bit, it's like people who have no clue what the other person wants trying to do that thing. And
Yeah.
I can't blame them. I don't know. I would have had any clue what he
Right.
wanted either. But it's like, they're like, okay, I guess we'll go with it, and that whole thing happened. So
yeah, we
I
had
will say, in retrospect, with other things that happen on the show and in the long run, I don't love how it's executed, but that idea, I think, ties in with other interesting ideas. We'll sort of leave it at that.
Okay.
For now.
Yeah. We had I had a theory that she was in the the drawer knob, which is made out of wood, which is from the trees that were probably made from the forest from Twin Peaks, and she's in that world now because we saw Bob,
dimension or
the
something.
dimension, and like she's trapped in the trees. I don't know. It's the only
Actually,
thing.
that's a good,
my theory.
we can actually address it. 'Cause now that I think about it, they don't really ever, they don't bring that part of it up again. I don't think they ever even say who, because I don't think Cooper sees her in there. I think just we in the audience do.
That's
Yeah.
right. Yeah.
So actually, yeah, there's one more line coming up in like 3 or 4 episodes. It's a total throwaway line where they sort of reference what you're talking about.
Yeah.
But there's actually some stuff beforehand that happened. So one of them is, the log lady. I know Captain Coulson said she didn't think her husband was in the log, so maybe it's not that literal, but it does sort of tie into that idea of there being spirits in the woods.
And that's just her opinion, but yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And then the other thing is something somebody pointed out to me like years after watching it. There's a scene 3 episodes earlier where Major Briggs, where he's being interrogated. The whole scene with the throne, him on the throne in the jungle or whatever.
Yeah.
And the symbol spinning through space. He puts his fingers on the wood table and he says, "Is this for the soul, my soul?"
Right.
And that is definitely some sort of tie-in to the other stuff about souls trapped in wood. And yeah, like you said, Bob and the trees and all that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's a pretty astute observation. I think you picked up on it a lot faster than I did when I watched it, because I was just like, what the hell? What is going on?
Yeah,
And that was like my total reaction.
mine too. But then when we do our show, we rewatch
You
it.
get
and,
to analyze it.
And I was just like, well, it's wood. Everything goes back to the woods.
Yeah.
And she's in it. And then now you just mentioned that line that Major Bridge says, and I've never realized that.
And I was always wondering I never understood what he said when he was saying that too. Is this for the soul? And I was like, what are you talking about? And
Yeah,
it's like,
now it makes sense.
So
the fact that he's touching the wood makes it the wooden table, I think. And
fascinating.
that whole scene, that's one of my favorite scenes in the whole mid-season, because it's like whole episodes will go by and you'll get nothing, and then you get one scene here and there that feels like it's like marching the baton forward a little bit,
Yeah.
And that's one of them. They even have the ceiling, the water cooler drip, which is definitely a huge callback to Leland.
Oh, yeah.
Which
definitely.
is like they never reference. That's another thing, actually, we should get into is, I know I've heard you talk about it, how Laura and Leland and the Palmers and, even Bob until he comes back for Josie's thing. That whole thing is just gone. And that was the pilot episode of the show is literally for. I mean, the whole episode's about Laura, but especially that first 45 minutes, like, Cooper isn't even there yet. It's just about this girl dying and the impact she had on the town. And that's an hour of broadcast time. That's an entire episode.
Yeah.
And that's how the show began. So I think me being a film buff and not really used to TV shows kind of going in different directions, it's like, well, that's the story you set up. Why do you stop telling it? Right. So that was another thing that was kind of hard for me to swallow. It was like, well, wait a second. You told us the stories about Laura Palmer.
Yeah.
And how she's gone. Now it's over and we're still here. Why? What's going on?
And they still have the picture of Laura at the end of the episodes.
Credits.
In the credits, too. So it's like, how can you why do you even bother to put that at the end of the credits if it's not about Laura Palmer? And
that's a good question, and I have a little pet theory about it. And who knows? It's probably not true. But if you notice, there's one episode. So she never appears at the end of the David Lynch episodes except for 2. She appears at the end of the pilot because that's establishing, the template of the show.
Right.
And she appears at the end of episode 9, which is the one where Bob crawls over the couch and attacks Maddie. Now, the only thing that makes episode 9 stand out from the other Lynch episodes is there's no image of Laura in it, and it doesn't solve her mystery. So episode 14 doesn't have an image of Laura other than maybe a picture on the wall, but it's all about solving her mystery. So obviously she's a huge part of it. So it almost makes me wonder: did David Lynch make a point of Laura has to be at the end of every show unless we actually make her the subject of the episode? Like episode 8, the premiere, you get that flashback to her death. Episode 2, you see her in the Red Room. So she's always in the episodes that she's not at the end of. And now the funny thing is, there is one episode, not directed by Lynch, where they don't use her in the end credits. And there's a perfectly logical explanation for that, which is that they have Ben Horn's home movies and they're really cool and they want to show them.
Right.
And that's 90%, I'm sure, what it is.
Right.
But there is an interesting little thing about that. In that episode, Ben Horn holds up a portrait of Laura, and he says, I was accused of killing Laura Palmer. It's one of the few shout-outs to her, and it's the only time, at least up to the point you're at now, it's the only time there's an image of Laura in the show itself. So it makes me wonder, was there a unwritten rule or a written rule that, Laura must be in the show, or she's got to be in the end credits.
Yeah.
He's got to have... So it's kind of funny to wonder, and maybe it's, like I said, could be total coincidence, but that is the only time you actually see an image of Laura in the show itself for this whole, stretch.
That is really
and
something.
Leland, too, they got that one headline, the Roger Hardy, the FBI agent, is reading the paper, which I would love to read that article. It says, town mourns Leland Palmer. It's like, well, good. Tell us how they mourned him, because we sure as hell didn't see that at the wake.
Oh, the paper. Whoever writes that paper is horrible.
The Gazette there.
The Gazette.
Exactly.
I like that you mentioned that it was probably David Lynch that maybe said that Laura Palmer's picture has to be in every credit and stuff. Especially when you've mentioned it before, that it seems like David Lynch is very much faceted in Laura Palmer. He doesn't want to let it go, and we can get to it in the future why, and maybe go back to it. But it's interesting that it does seem like David Lynch is not done with Laura Palmer, and so even if we're not doing the mystery anymore, maybe he wants her in the credits and stuff
to remind us.
Yeah, and if you look at the real reasons he left the second season, the stuff he says doesn't make sense. He says, I want to direct Wild at Heart. Well,
that's not
Wild
true.
at Heart came, a little history lesson for everybody. Wild at Heart premiered at Cannes in May 1990, which is when the first season was wrapping up, and ABC had not yet commissioned a second season. So there was no second season when Wild at Heart was done. So by the time, and then to top it off, when the second season starts, he's directing half of the first 8 hours. He does the premiere, he does the follow-up, he does the reveal. It's only after the reveal that he disappears, at which point Wild at Heart had been in theaters for months. It probably left theaters already. So that doesn't wash.
Right.
And I'm sure he remembers it that way, but obviously something else pulled him from it. And I think the logical conclusion, especially, given more stuff we won't get into as much now, but he clearly was drawn to Laura Palmer as a character, like you said, and I think the idea of removing her from the story was kind of disenchanted him from the show. That's the only kind of speculation I can draw based on the pattern of when he was there and when he wasn't and everything like that.
I mean,
so it seems like to him, he's a filmmaker too.
Right.
It's good to remember a filmmaker has a story, and he talks about how he loves an ongoing story, but if you listen to how he describes it, it's very different from like Mark Frost or other TV showrunners, how they would say ongoing story means, you add new things, you go different places, it turns into something else. Frost was very much about, look, let's end this storyline, we've got to start up a new one, get the Windom Earle thing going, new story, new arc, chart it out over these episodes. It's a very, logical sort of relay race approach to TV storytelling. But Lynch is always not about getting to the end and starting a new beginning. He's about stretching out the middle. That's how he talks about ongoing stories. He says, and then, Laura would be there in the background, and other characters would come to the foreground, but she'd be there like the sun, So, I think in his mind, a TV show was like a super long movie.
Yeah.
Where it begins, and then the middle goes on and on and on and on and on. You don't get to the end. Whereas for Fox, it was like you do beginning, middle, end. Then you do a new beginning, middle, end. Then you do a new, and it was like moving on to the next thing. So, yeah, I think that's part of it, too, is he just felt like you ended this story. Why is it still going on?
Right.
Yeah.
It's funny.
So the interesting thing will be, and I won't spoil this for you, but he's coming back in 2016-17, so that much is obvious.
Yeah.
The question is, what, if anything, would bring him back to the show, and how would he deal with this material now? Because it's gone so long without his touch at this point. Like I said, you're 9 episodes past anything he's directed.
Yeah.
And so that becomes that. I remember that fascinated me on my first viewing. Is he going to direct again? And if he does, what's he going to do with all this?
Right.
How is he going to make it his again? So
it's funny you bring up that Lynch maybe sees it as one long movie. I mean, when they're talking about the new series in 2017, they were, I think it's basically the president of Showtime is saying it's like one long movie that Lynch is making. He's filming all of them back to back, and they'll edit it and they'll figure it. And I didn't understand that quote. It's like, what are you talking about? They have 9 scripts. There's probably separate storylines.
Yeah.
But then for you to describe how Lynch looks at it, I kind of get it now.
Yeah,
I understand what you're saying, that to him it is one long movie and stuff. I get it.
Cuts where you
and
need
on top of that, my understanding with this is they don't have 9 long scripts. They actually have one gigantic script, and they haven't decided how they're going to split it into episodes, which is totally fascinating.
That is so fascinating. Wow.
So, and he's shooting it as he would shoot a movie. So it's like, okay, shoot scenes from, the beginning, the middle, and the end, because we're at this location now. It's sort of like how they shot True Detective. They shot all of the 95 footage, and then they went and they shot the 2012 footage, even though it's all intercut within various episodes.
I didn't even know
they
that.
They didn't do it in episode units. They did it all, and I think maybe the Nick, too, the Steven Soderbergh show. Whenever they've got one director directing the whole thing, it seems much more likely that they're just going to take it and shoot it more as a movie. But I mean, by the same token, True Detective was scripted as episodes. So if this isn't, it's still pretty unusual.
And just to remind people too about David Lynch, he never wanted to solve the Laura Palmer case.
That's true.
He always wanted it could be 5 years later, and Cooper's still trying to figure out who killed Laura Palmer.
That would have been pretty cool.
It could have been. I'm glad it was revealed because the show could have been canceled. But
we still have the killer out there, in my opinion, Bob.
Yeah.
I mean, Bob is not a person you might not be able to put in a jail cell, but he's a spirit or a thought or something.
He's something that needs to be stopped.
Exactly. So Bob is kind of almost like that killer.
Yeah.
We don't know what. He sees Bob. So
Cooper sees Bob, right?
Cooper sees Bob. So that was intriguing, but we talked about that. It could have been better. But we saw Bob, so that makes you like, oh, Bob's still around. And I thought, was Bob Josie? Why was Bob there? Who does he represent in that room? And I can't think of who other than Josie. Or I don't know.
You're trying to put a human,
human
touch
with
with the spirit.
With the spirit,
I don't know if you can.
Well, we'll have fun. I told Ben this. I know at some point we wanted to talk about the mythology, and I think even before you get to the final episode, there's sort of a spot where you can pause and look back and be like, maybe it makes a little more sense after the final episode, but you can sort of look at things that were developed even during the week episodes and be like, oh, okay, this actually kind of ties together in an interesting way. You know?
Yeah.
Even though I don't think Lynch and Frost, well, I pretty much know based on what both of them and everyone else has said, they weren't working together on this, on developing it, you know?
Right.
I
don't know if it was their manager, but they basically had a sit-down lunch and had to bring Lynch and Frost
Yeah,
together.
I read that.
Yeah, and it was something where it's like, they're not talking, they're not working together, we need to bring these guys and save the show. But let's save that for another time. We'd love to have you back on after the series.
Yeah.
So after the series, before Firewalk with Me, we'd love to have you back on and kind of maybe kind of look at the last few episodes of the series.
Yeah, I'm excited to get through this last stretch of episodes.
Like 6 episodes.
Six episodes left, and I mean, all in all, it is a big mush in a way. I can't say episodes like you guys can, but I can say storylines. And I'm happy a lot of these storylines disappeared. I'm very sad that Albert is not coming back.
Yes.
Ben has told me that Albert's not coming back.
No more Josie, no more James, no more Albert.
I could care less about Josie and James.
Say
Huh?
something. How can I put this? You may not have. Pat, what he said is correct, and yet I will also say you may not have seen the last of Albert.
That's true.
Okay.
Okay, I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, there might be a way that he comes back. But
All right, well, that's cool to hear.
Yeah, I know. I have to say, but yeah, I'll leave it like that too.
All right. And James, I thought, like James went off and did his spin-off TV show that failed. Like
what are you talking about?
Yeah, exactly.
Evelyn Marsh.
Yeah. He's like Joey
What
from
a
Friends.
strange idea to do that.
Right. Who would have thought they would actually? It's like the name of the show was called Twin Peaks. Let's have our character leave Twin Peaks and do a storyline. And it's like, it was ballsy in some ways, but it's like doesn't make any sense. The show is Twin Peaks. We focus on Twin Peaks.
And his character is so dull and drab. It's just.
I think we talked about Bryon. I thought, he couldn't deal with the losing his girlfriend. Laura Palmer got murdered, and now he's in the same situation where a woman's getting beat up by her husband. How do you handle that? But they didn't really do a good job addressing it. But it seems like here's a chance for a guy who couldn't save his girlfriend
to redeem himself.
But,
yeah. It was kind of horrible.
Well. Well, Joel, thank you for being on the show. It was great talking with you. And
you guys too.
And what do you guys? What do you got next? You got some other projects? I mean, we don't have much time, but I know you're doing The Prisoner now. You're watching The Prisoner, and
I'm glad you brought that up.
I love the show.
I've never seen it.
I know. I've been telling you got to see it sometime.
Yeah.
I think what is it like 16 episodes, something like that. It's not that many. 18, 17 episodes.
That's it? What was it on Fox? What was it on?
What is it? 1960s. We're talking.
Okay.
We're talking a long time ago.
All right.
But it's a great series. It's got this agent who has been dragged to an island. He's been kidnapped and on an island, and he won't say his name. He's not a number.
Sounds like Lost and Twin Peaks.
It is. It's like
mushed together.
Yes.
Yeah, well, Mark Frost apparently loved it and was influenced by it.
Wow, cool. I'll have to check it out.
And I mean,
I'm doing a weekly series and a viewing diary, and the fun thing about it is I'm watching the show for the first time. So I'm like Bryon in this. I have no idea where it's going.
Yeah.
And it's just like flying blind. And so I think it'll be fun for people to read who've seen it, to sort of relive that, and it'll be fun for people to read who haven't, who are hopefully watching it along with me, and it's all on YouTube, the whole series. So it's out there, and it's on Netflix, on DVD. So,
and you don't know where it goes, right? You don't know the ending?
I don't know where it goes. I know it has an amazing finale that people compare to Twin Peaks finale, and so that should be interesting. But I have really pretty much avoided almost all spoilers. I know one little thing that I stumbled across that doesn't seem like that big of a deal, honestly. Basically, the actor who's going to play somebody in the final episode.
Cool.
That's it.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's
but it's pretty. So it's funny you mentioned that, because also Sparkwood and 21, after they interviewed me, interviewed John Bernardi, another listener, and he brought the prisoner up too. So it's like one of those things where suddenly you hear it everywhere and you see it everywhere when you start,
It's coincidence. What does the
watching it
Cooper
or-
say when two more things? Or I'm not going to
Exactly, yeah.
Yep.
But it's like we should pay strict attention to this.
Yes.
The fact that two people have talked about the prisoner, and now I'm talking about the prisoner. So
I know.
it's something special. I
It's
feel
intrigued me. I'll have to check it
I
out.
feel like there's an anniversary coming up. Maybe it's probably going to be 2018 or
I
something
think-
like that.
Next year is the 50th anniversary.
50th, yeah.
Because I think it was 1967.
Okay, right. So I want to get the Blu-ray because I really do love this series, but I'm like, okay, I'm gonna hold off for the 50th anniversary because I'm sure they'll come
Yeah.
out with a new Blu-ray and
Yeah.
it's well, awesome. We definitely should check that out. Bryon, you really should watch it.
It sounds good. I will check
Yeah.
it out.
Well, Joel, thank you again for being on the show. We can't wait to have you on again.
Yeah, I can't wait to get these 6 episodes. I really am dying to see the finale, to see what happens.
Yeah,
and
you're
all
so
this.
close. It's crazy. You're so close to the end.
I know. This journey has been amazing. And I've loved it all the way through. With all the, we criticize and critique things, but all in all, it's been awesome watching it.
Yeah.
I've been enjoying it, so. And I missed it over
So-
the holidays, so.
Let's do a little thing. We'll do it again. I guess I'm going to appear. You said you want to do it after the show, but before the movie.
Yeah.
Right.
And then I know we'll discuss after the movie at one point. You got a whole lineup. I can't wait to hear that stuff.
Yeah.
Let's do this little game. And one of the things I can only ask you this time, and the other thing I can ask you again afterwards.
Okay.
So are you still pretty unspoiled, or have you kind of stumbled across some images? You can cut this part out if you don't want listeners to know, but
Oh,
my
no.
curiosity, have you stumbled across anything that kind of gives anything away? Are you pretty...
Yeah, in all honesty, I never knew who the killer was. And
Yeah.
I think the internet in getting into the community of Twin Peaks has been really good about not spoiling that or talking about that. There might have been pictures that I've seen that I didn't even know what a pertained to, it went to into the storyline. So for me, it meant nothing. It was like Happy Father's Day meme with Leland.
Right,
and
right.
Ben's like, I can't believe you posted that photo, like after the fact.
Yeah.
Because that was when he was looking in the mirror when
Right.
you knew he was crazy.
Or he was Bob.
He was
right.
Bob. And for me, I just saw that photo and I'm like, oh, it's Leland. He's a dad. Yeah,
Right,
Happy
yeah.
Father's Day. And there is one
Well,
photo.
probably the shot where he was turned slightly away and you can't
That's
see
true.
Bob's
That's true.
face.
Yeah.
So there's a shot they use where it's like, you can, if you look for it, it's like, oh, that's Bob in the mirror. But yeah. Here's my 2 questions for you
Yeah.
are, without getting into things that you may have kind of peek of or feel like you are spoiled or to see things coming, without getting into that stuff,
Yeah.
where do you see the show going in the next 6 episodes? If you had to predict, what do you think the show is sort of leading towards, or what events are going to sort of unfold,
I would want to see, or I hope this show is going, is Cooper gets out of his funk because of the images we just saw. Cooper is, he's been lost. Yeah, he's like, he's not part of the FBI anymore. He's not wearing his suit anymore. I think he gets out of his funk somehow and he goes back to old Cooper, I would hope, by the end of the series. I think the horns, that Mr. Whelan's going to help.
Wheeler, yeah.
Wheeler, him and Audrey might hook up, but might not. And then Audrey still likes Cooper. So maybe something happens with them. With Norma's sister coming around makes me uneasy because I feel like that's just another obstacle between her and big, Ed. And I kind of like them together, kind of like that. And I feel like
do
having
you think the sister is going to be a problem for Norma, like the mother was?
Yeah, I think the
Bryon
sister...
was saying on the last episode that his Norma's sister is going to get between Big Ed and Norma,
Yeah.
and that maybe the sister will put the moves on Big Ed.
Yeah, that's what I
Since
thought.
now that Nadine is sort of out of the picture.
Yeah. I feel like that couple, it works, but without drama, without the soap opera, it's not interesting.
Right.
You don't want two people to be happily in love. Like, that's not interesting. So we got to throw a wrench in there.
You gotta have the drama, yeah.
Yeah, so that's my feeling about their side story.
Right, come on.
And everybody else is kind
What
of...
about Windom Earle?
The whole Windom Earle stuff. Last we saw, he needs a queen. He got all three of the girls into the bar. They put their note together. They read it. I was saying to Ben, I'm like, how is he going to pick his queen? And is he going to take all three? And if I had to pick the person he's going to go for, it's going to be Audrey. Because that could put her back in the arms of Cooper.
Yeah.
Pretty cool theory.
And that would give a reason for her to get away from Mr. Wheeler. I'm going to keep saying the wrong one.
That's right.
To get out of the arms of him, because Cooper has to rescue her again. I don't know, Shelley, there's really no there's no gain there. There's no gain on Shelley. I like Shelley. But there's no gain. And he's after Cooper, and Audrey, since he seems to know everything without the internet. He's like, I got photos of them. I print out the everything.
Episode. I think he has the internet. I think he does.
He goes to Kinko's and he prints out photos of people. But I think he's going to know that Audrey means something to him. Because Donna, nobody cares about Donna. Donna just went across and helped James, and nobody cared.
Yeah.
Her parents don't care where she is.
She had to bring her $12 to James.
$12 to James.
Yeah.
And
That was so silly. All of my life savings, all $12.03.
Yeah. And nobody helped her. And Shelley, she's had it rough. Let's let her be, let's have her good life back at the diner. I think it's going to be Audrey. That's what I kind of feel is going to happen. I think Audrey's going to be kidnapped or something. Windom Earle's going to do something to her, and it's going to bring Cooper back out of his funk to be Cooper again and rescue her, maybe, I hope.
Sounds cool.
Leo might just go back into another coma.
Yeah.
Well, cool, man. So thank you, Joel, for being on the show.
Wait. I had one more question.
One more question.
One more that we'll ask again the next time and see how it's changed. What do you expect, or I guess you could start with anything you know about, and you can cut that out too, but just pretext. But what do you expect? What do you think the film will address?
Oh, God, the film?
Yeah.
Oh, that's a good one. I mean, I'm excited to watch it. I think it will address more of Laura Palmer's past, of who she was, I hope. I want more. Cooper's in it. I don't even know who's in the film. I know David Bowie's in it.
Perfect. Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, I know David Bowie's in it, so I thought he was in the show, but Ben had to tell me when he passed away. I was like, oh, we're going to see him in the show.
David Bowie,
Yeah. So I really want to know more about David Bowie's character, but I feel like I want to know more about Laura's past. I want to know more about Cooper and the agents. Mm-hmm. So I'm hoping that's what it gives me. I know nothing about the movie. Nothing's been spoiled.
So you're kind of hoping that maybe they open up a new investigation.
Yeah, and
into the mystery that they sort of closed down on the show.
Yeah, and maybe if the whole Bob thing isn't resolved, do we go into the movie with that? And why is David Bowie wearing white?
I'll tell you. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's perfect. We'll leave it at that.
Yeah. So those are my questions. I know nothing else about it. I don't even know who's in it other than I think Agent Cooper's in it. I know David Bowie's in it.
Yeah.
And that's all I kind of know, really.
That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's awesome.
There's really nothing that's
I will tell you, I'm going to spoil one thing because it's such a non-spoiler.
Okay.
Jürgen Prochnow from Dune is in it.
Who?
And he's in literally, I think, maybe 3 seconds.
What did you say? Can you say that again?
Jürgen Prochnow, the actor, the German actor who is in Dune, who plays Kyle MacLachlan's cat. He is in the Twin Peaks movie for about 5 seconds.
Right.
And has no dialogue.
That's fun. And then
it always cracks me up, and he's listed in the opening credits as like one of the main actors.
Wow, that's crazy.
And I think the missing pieces, the deleted scenes, there's a little bit more of him.
A little bit more, but I think he still has no dialogue.
But it is so funny.
Top billing, and he says nothing.
Right. He was in Dune.
Yeah.
I mean, he was, I think, was he the father? I think he was the father character in Dune or so. I mean, it's been a long time since I've seen it. But
wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah. It's good stuff. Well, I think this is a good place to end the show.
Yeah, thank you, Joel.
Yep.
And
Thank you, Joel.
I'm excited to get back, like, ask me the same questions. That is a great
Right.
idea.
We should make a note of this and make sure.
Yeah.
Joel, you'll remember.
Yeah, you'll remember.
Yeah.
I want to end the show with maybe just a little snippet of chapter 13 that focused Joel's journey through Twin Peaks.
Okay.
So we'll end the show there. But yeah, so I thank you, Joel. And why don't we say where people
We're
can
on
find us?
Twitter, Twin Peaks Unwrapped. You can find us on Facebook, Twin Peaks Unwrapped. And comments, questions about anything, please email us at twinpeaksunwrapped@gmail.com. And iTunes, please rate us and subscribe to us and leave us a comment.
Cool. And Joel.
And thank you, Joel.
And Joel, where can
Yeah.
they find you again? What if people are looking?
They can find me on Twitter at Lost in the Movies, all one word. And then my blog the address is thedancingimage.blogspot.com. And Journey Through Twin Peaks on YouTube.
I regret to inform you of your suspension from the FBI.
Characters and storylines are swept into unwelcome new directions, beginning with the introduction of a new subplot.
The mayor and his brother.
The episode's director later acknowledged, "The old brothers fighting at the wake sticks out to me as strange, a precursor to a lot of over-the-top humor.
Remember where you are and why we're here.
It feels like one of the moments where Twin Peaks changes." The episode is full of such moments, alternated with cutaways to grim, moody exteriors increasingly at odds with the sitcom material. Bobby Briggs begins wearing suits. So does Audrey Horne. Cooper, on the other hand, loses the suit. The show feels so light, we half expect it to float away. No wonder this episode ends with a character abducted, seemingly by UFOs. But the most alarming disappearing act involves a relationship, not a person.
So this is it? You save my life, then break my heart?
Cooper, for all intents and purposes, dumps Audrey Horne.
Yeah, I know. I'm a teenager.
And you were involved in a case I was working on.
If this development feels abrupt, it is. Kyle MacLachlan vetoed a proposed Cooper-Audrey story arc, claiming his character would never go to bed with a naive, troubled teenager. But Cooper already told her this in Season 1, and it didn't kill their chemistry.
And they'll never let that happen again.
Their longing is born of loneliness as well as attraction, and they don't have to become lovers to remain soulmates. Sadly, despite the occasional flare-up, it is not to be.
One of these days, before you know it, I'm gonna be grown up and on my own. You better watch out.
Where can Twin Peaks go from here?
Okay, Audrey. It's a deal.
With one dramatic tentpole gone and a replacement prevented,
Hold on, I'm gonna throw you.
Twin Peaks doubles